It's my pleasure now for our final talk right now, beyond ChatGPT. So I'd like to bring forward and introduce Michael de la Torre. Michael's the founder and CEO of Redica Systems, a data and analytics platform which helps life sciences companies stay compliant with changing regulations and enforcement. A data analyst at heart, Michael seeks to combine the best of industry expertise with technology to produce extraordinary insights and actionable intelligence to create new ways of decision-making, powered by highly domain-specific and complex data. Please join me in welcoming Michael to the stage.
All right, I guess the microphone's working. And they got my PowerPoint right. All right, we're off to a rolling start. Quick question for the audience. How many people are familiar with ChatGPT? You've used it before. Okay, hands down. How many of you have a good idea of how AI is going to affect quality and regulatory in the pharmaceutical industry over the next 2 to 3 years? Okay. Good news. You've come to the right presentation. All right. I'll give you a hint. The robot overlords are not coming in the next 2 to 3 years at least. I'm not giving you a 20 to 30 year view. I'm giving you a 2 to 3 year view, but the robot overlords are not coming. So when ChatGPT 4 or when GPT-4 came out, right, the new release of GPT, it had an enormous effect on me and on my company. I had always been a little bit dismissive of AI, and it was kind of this, it was kind of that. You had these toy models and whatnot, but when I started using ChatGPT, it absolutely blew my mind. And so a lot of this presentation is a result of that kind of 6+ month journey that I've gone on, shifting my company being from a more kind of traditional data engineering and data analytics business to a little bit more AI driven. And I'll get into the details of what all that means, but it's pretty amazing, right? So I did a prompt, write me a 10-line sonnet in an iambic pentameter about a drug facility audit using 211. And that's what it came up with. It's pretty remarkable, right? Anybody have any experience with this? Right? You do it and you're like, oh my God, right? It helps me write my emails. It helps me do press releases. I mean, it's a pretty good writer. So it's amazing, right? It can do everything. Maybe not. Anybody see this article? So what happened was some lawyers who were a little bit lazy decided to basically put in a briefing in Manhattan, and ChatGPT hallucinated case history, okay? And they're now, they're debarred now, but it looked real, right? It looked real. It hallucinated, but it hallucinated in a way that was highly credible, right? So it's often in error, rarely in doubt, and it doesn't tell you when it hallucinates. And so for us, so what about a pharma example? So this came from our data, so this is kind of a dirty observation that came off of 483, and we said, okay, using 21 CFR 211, what was being cited here? That's a pretty good output, right? Right? How many people have the Code of Federal Regulations memorized? I don't. Put your hands down. If you raise your hand, leave. There's one problem. Section 58 doesn't have leveraged subsections. So it hallucinated. It made up a CFR. It got the wrong CFR. And so this is our expert analysis, right? And so the guy says, our expert SME says, hey, the content's great. It's just weird that it would just make something up like that. How can it do all of these things right and get that critical part, like making up a CFR, wrong? What's going on here? Okay. What is it great at? It's great great at creativity. If you're stuck on something and you need some ideas, you need some prompts, it is a phenomenal B+ student at most subjects, okay? But it makes stuff up. But it's very fluent, it can translate things for you, it can write in coherent sentences, it does a lot of good things. What is it not good at? Number one, factual accuracy, right? It hallucinates. It doesn't explain itself. It's not always repeatable. Has anybody tried to give it the same prompt twice? Do you get the same answer? You do not get the same answer. It does not understand nuance and context. So I know we're at a kind of a pharmaceutical conference. We talk about supply chain. We talk about distribution, things like that. What does GDP mean? No, it means gross domestic product. What does API mean? No, it means application protocol interface, right, to 99% of the world, okay? So the more specific your domain, the more obscure your content, the less ChatGPT is gonna do right outside of the box. It's gonna hallucinate more and more and more. But even if it gets it right, it's not explainable, it's not repeatable, it doesn't cite its sources, it's got problems. And so all of these things actually kind of pretty much describes the job of a quality and regulatory professional, right? Judgment, accuracy, repeatability, right? So we probably can't use ChatGPT. And so this is pretty common with AI use cases, right? So you start off on the left. You have a really interesting model. It looks good. Great demo. But then how do you get to meaningful AI human interactions that you can use? Right? So that's the AI chasm, and how are we going to bridge that gap, okay? But first, what is a meaningful human AI interaction in our industry? What's theoretically possible within the next 2-3 years? We were just talking about excipients, right? So DuPont gets a warning letter. Microcrystalline cellulose. What was the first two questions that everybody in the industry asked if you were in a pharma company? What's that? Do we have this problem? And how broad is this problem? Because we all just had this experience with nitrosamines, right? The one chart from the USB, it was like boom, 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 right? Like it just started getting affected in all these other products. Regulators were coming out with guidances, and it just kept rolling, right? So that's the first thing. So how widespread is this, and do we have this problem? And so how does the quality expert go about doing it today? Send a bunch of emails, get their highlighter, download a bunch of things. You go on this Easter egg hunt across systems, across people. You start reaching out to everything. But with AI, this is theoretically possible. So looking at enforcement documents, looking at adverse events, looking at recalls. We have identified that this issue first appeared 2 years ago, and you didn't see it, okay? 2 of your suppliers were affected, and 1 of your competitors is affected. And looking at batch records, lab tests, deviations, investigations, audits, all the internal information, it is highly likely that we also have this problem. We buy from DuPont. 6 products are affected, 3 manufacturing facilities are potentially affected, and these lots are also potentially affected. Also, all theoretically possible with AI. And then finally, would you like alerts on this topic as it evolves over time with both internal and external data? This is a meaningful interaction for humans and AI, and it is possible in the next 2 to 3 years. How are we going to get there? Does anybody know what any of this stuff means? Okay. Supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning, generative AI. Which one of these is going to do it? Is it going to be all of them? Anybody have a guess? Supervised learning, it's labeling things, okay? So what does that mean? So detecting things, facial recognition. Facebook is really good at this, right? Google's really good at this, right? So all the extractive learning. So they have thousands of people basically rating the quality of their AI every single day, labeling things, testing things, like that. So that's supervised learning. So the AI isn't just off doing its own thing. It's being trained to build specific models to accomplish specific tasks. Not one model, it's models. Thousands, millions of little mini models that do different tasks. That's supervised learning. Unsupervised learning, it's clustering things, right? So every time a plane lands, GE engine uploads it to the cloud, do the analysis, we might have a problem. So all the predictive maintenance stuff on spinning equipment, things like that, most of that is what's called unsupervised learning. Reinforcement learning, we're never gonna use that here, so we're just gonna skip over that. And then generative AI, which is what ChatGPT falls into. Text image creation, song creation, things like that. Which one's the most important for the enterprise? Supervised learning, okay, we all passed the test. All right, very good. Okay, so it's the big chart, and it's already where a lot of the value is being driven from. So this isn't me, this is Andrew Ng from Stanford, and basically said, okay, what's gonna drive all the value for the enterprise? It's gonna be supervised learning. Because this is actually the work that gets done by humans. This is the stuff that's going to get replaced. This is the stuff that's going to be augmented. Right, generative AI, yes, is gonna grow. And then basically what he's saying is a lot of the unsupervised learning use cases, a lot of the predictive maintenance use cases on spinning equipment, things like that, a lot of it's already been done. Most of the value's already been gotten from a lot of those different use cases. Maybe not in this industry, but he's looking broadly across industry. I mean, electric generation, equipment, things like that. It all has unsupervised learning modules, and that's been going on for over a decade. Okay. What do we mean by labeling things? Let's talk about music. 30 years ago, right? 40 years ago, maybe, go to a record store. How do we get recommendations on music? Some weirdo behind the counter with a weird haircut, wearing a weird shirt, right? Giving us a recommendation, maybe on the Grateful Dead, right? So go deep into topics that you don't care about, and then maybe the topics that you care about and doesn't know anything about. Right? How do we go from that to where we can get a AI creating a Taylor Swift song? It's probably about standing in the rain. It's probably about being in a car after you went to a bar. It's probably going to be something like that, complaining about a recent breakup. And AI can do a pretty good job of making a Taylor Swift song, right? How do we go from weirdo behind the counter to fake Taylor Swift, right, in 30 years? Well, it started with Pandora, okay? So I don't know if you guys remember your first experience with Pandora, but I did. I made a radio station based on Queen because Queen is awesome, okay? And now, one of my favorite artists is David Bowie. How the hell did Pandora know that I was gonna like David Bowie? I didn't tell them about David Bowie. I don't know, he was some weird guy from some movie with a weird haircut. How did I know that he was one of the most awesome artists of all time? Because, it knew me. So the Pandora Music Genome Project, this is what they did. They had this insight. So they got humans, they got PhDs, and they basically categorized all of these songs, right? So it was first done by humans, and then it's now done by machines, and they found other different categories of music. But basically the tone, timbre, length, musicality, vocals, instruments, etc. You can basically break apart a song into all of its different component parts and cluster it, right? And so it started with humans, then it went to machines. Each of those features can either be similar, they can be opposite, or they can be unrelated, right? It's a thing called a vector. Remember what a vector is, right? Write that down, vector, okay? And so it's statisticians and engineers, it's good old-fashioned statistics, machine learning, but it is just math at the end of the day. Putting all of those things together, you get clusters into things that we understand. So classical music, heavy metal, things like that. The math of those clusters is here. And so basically this is music types running down the side and music types running across the top. And then the similarity of the different music types are the different clusters that we see here in the circles. And so what you see is hard rock and heavy metal are very similar, right? So Led Zeppelin and Ozzy Osbourne, pretty similar. And you might argue, oh, well, Led Zeppelin's probably heavy metal, but maybe it's hard rock. So it's very, very hard to tell those apart, but it's pretty easy to tell heavy metal apart from a heavy orchestra. So what this is saying is Wagner has nothing to do with Ozzy Osbourne, right? Mathematically, okay? But Wagner and Tchaikovsky, kind of the same. They're heavy orchestra. Star Wars sounds a lot like Wagner, doesn't it? And that's how we can hear that, right? But the machine can also tell you, okay? So when you plot all of this stuff on a cluster, you get these big galaxy clusters. You kind of reduce it down to 3 dimensions, and David Bowie and Queen are kind of over there. And so that's what these recommendation engines are doing. So this magical recommendation engine, this magical playlist creator, this magical Taylor Swift stuff all kind of starts here, right? And at the end of the day, it's just software that picks from the local cluster and adjusts to thumbs up, thumbs down, and then people's listening preferences. So it's great clustering and a little software on top, and that's how you get the recommendation engines. Make sense, everybody? All right, we all understand AI. Okay. Okay? So we're demystifying it. So in music, it started with labeling stuff through supervised learning and through humans labeling things. And then it went into assisting the human in making decisions. So a little bit of unsupervised learning and clustering, but a lot of automation and software. So that's how you got this playlist. That's how you got the personalized music. That's how you got the new trends. And then it eventually went into creation and generation. So how does this apply to quality? Well, you might have already guessed it. We're going to start with labeling stuff. Okay? So quick question. Is quality and regulatory a structured world? Or is it an unstructured world? Unstructured. Is it a little unstructured? Or is it a frickin' mess? It's a mess, right? So we saw that first presentation with those helpful lawyers finding the laundry. How much structuring and linking of data were they doing? It's pretty much a majority of the problem that they were solving. They were taking this unstructured mess of information, extracting the key information, linking it, and then understanding what those relationships meant. And so that's what we have to do. Wave 1, it's all about using AI to process the data through supervised learning models. So text extraction, entity extraction, translation, vectorization, labeling, et cetera. The next wave, which we're already into, is assisting the human in making decisions. So that's where you're going to get all the notifications, the routing, the impact assessment, the diagnostics, the trend detection, all those Pandora-style playlists for quality and regulatory. And then the third wave, which will be coming at some point, generative AI. So for example, you could suggest, so hey, here's a new guidance. Which SOPs are impacted? That's kind of wave 2. The third wave, suggest some changes to my SOPs based on this new guidance that I can do. So ChatGPT is never going to be your QP, your qualified person, but it should help get the work done. Okay. So let's walk through this. So structuring the unstructured, now we're going to get detailed. All right, AI-based text extraction, also known as intelligent document processing, if you guys want to Google it and look this stuff up. There's a lot of technologies. This is a whole new category that's just emerged. And so this actually comes from work that we've been doing on warning letters, 483s, other regulatory documents. This is a warning letter. First step is you have to extract the words, okay? Word level segmentation. Second step, you got to extract the layout, okay? So it kind of looks like the highlighter, right? Third step, you got to extract the clusters, okay? Fourth step, you got to categorize the clusters, okay? Labeling stuff, extracting stuff. And so now we're sitting here and saying, this row is the deficiency title. This is the introduction. This is the deficiency things. And so do you think one AI model can do this for all document types, or do you think we're going to have models? Models and models and models and models and models specifically trained by an expert to do this job. So it's the pairing of humans and machines creating something that can augment human work. So that's why it's the supervised learning, right? Because you got to go through iteration after iteration after iteration. Trust me on that one, okay? And so then understanding meaning comes next. So now that you've structured the text, you've extracted it, you've prepared it, now how do we understand meaning? And so here's an example of, actually this is 4 different models producing this output on this one warning letter sentence. So what's the job to be done? All right, all these models are very specific to jobs to be done. So the job to be done is, hey, I am a quality professional trying to figure out what this warning letter is saying. So what is the area being cited? We have 6 quality systems. What's the chances, okay, so for all you GMP people, what's the chances that this is not quality unit being cited here in this sentence? 0. It's definitely the quality system, so it gets a 1.0, right? What are the chances that it's not batch release? Well, the model's a little bit shaky on that one, but you got to draw the thresholds, you got to train it, you got to make it a little more confident. And then the deficiency reason was extracted, that's a different model. And then the actual summary, that was done by GPT 3.5 to actually say, okay, now take all this, now give me a summary. But it gave you a summary within the bounded context of the output from the other models. So it's not just like picking from the entire corpus of data, it's picking from a very, very tight set of data and say, okay, within this, what do you think is going on here? And it does a pretty good job once you bound the context of these models. So there you go. So 4 different models to produce this result, and this is, live and real. So how did we do it? Remember we talked about vectors? All right, call it out. Who knows the answer to this question? Europeans don't get the answer. Oh, he already answered. Okay, so this is Paris, right? How did we do it? Berlin's the capital. You have a vector in your head of countries and capitals. You have the relationship of that word. It allowed you to fill in the blank. This is how humans think, okay? What's your % confidence in that answer? Pretty high. Now you're questioning yourself a little bit, but you said it. You were confident enough to scream it out in front of all of us and risk the ridicule of your peers. You were pretty confident, right? And so that's how the machine is, right? So it stores this information mathematically, just like we did with music, and then it has confidence intervals and what it does. So there's vectors for everything. So you can vectorize words, you can vectorize sentence, you can vectorize paragraphs, entire documents, and it's storing the relationship and meaning between the words. What do I mean by that? So embedding. Embedding is a fancy word for applying statistics on top of text, okay? And so what do we have here? So queen, is it a living being? What's the probability that it's a living being? Pretty high, right? Probably, if you think about all the text that you've ever read, the word queen is probably a living being. So it could be a bee, it could be an ant, it could be a human, but it might be chess, right? So it can't be completely confident because it doesn't know the context. So it's saying 80% chance that it's a living being, but we might be talking about chess, right? And then what are the chances that it's royalty? I would argue that the band Queen is royalty, but but Princess Di, if you're talking about the royal wedding, it's higher. So these confidence intervals change over time and within the context of the sentence, within the context of the document, and they kind of do, and that's how ChatGPT works. It's just a statistical model. Well, it's a really, really complicated, awesome statistical model, but it's just a statistical model at the end of the day that leverages embeddings. Make sense? Okay. So that's what we're doing. So we are training models and models and models to understand the context of our information. So after we processed it, extracted it, we now are building these embedding models at the sentence level, the paragraph level, the document level, and creating what's called a vector database. So vector databases, et cetera. And it bounds the context of these models. And so when we use that, we can do really cool things. But before we get to that, we have to do entity extraction and linking. What is that? Well, I'm gonna ask a quick question. Is there a unique ID system for pharmaceutical manufacturing sites globally? What is it?
Well, not all.
Yes, but, okay. What is it?
I think FDA does a pretty good job.
FDA has the best start, and that's why we started with the FDA. So the FEI. Is the FEI a unique identifier for an address? It is not. Same address can have multiple different FEIs because you can have, well, maybe the zip code. So Abbott, Puerto Rico has a bunch of different FEIs because they do a bunch of different stuff there, right? Stanford Hospital in Palo Alto has 30 different FEIs because there's 30 clinical investigators that operate at that same address, right? So FEI is not a unique identifier. Neither is a DUNS number. Neither is MHRA's system. Neither is PMDA. Neither is the EMA. There's no unique identifier for sites in existence. Well, we tried to create one, but same thing with an inspection, same thing with a recall, same thing with an adverse event. There's no unique identifiers for any of these things. Everybody has their own ID system, and all of the same events can be floating around just unlinked, right? And so what we've done is we've created what's called the Redica ID. So in order to unify all of these things, in order to unify the FDA with the EMA, with Health Canada, with MHRA, with the Netherlands, with HPRA, with Swissmedic, we've had to create our own universal ID system, okay? You might disagree with the choices that we made, right? Because one of our choices was, if it's a different FEI, it's a different site, even if it's at the same address. That's a choice we made. So we have a unique ID system. We've also created organizations. We've created inspection IDs. We've created people IDs. This is how we're most famous for our inspector profiles, and this is how we do it. Right? We had to come up with a person ID, a unique identifier, and so we can link all the events that FDA investigator did. And then it gets really fun. Now you got to link them, right? So how do you link products to sites, link those to inspection, link those to regulations, approval events, et cetera? So it's either if you're a data person, it's a galaxy schema or a satellite schema, depending on how you could do this. So you try and link everything to everything, and then when you've extracted it, when you've got the meeting, now you can do some pretty cool stuff with AI, right? So this is how you get the human-machine interactions. And so here's an example. This is live, so sample of the current state, and so this is the type of thing that we're doing. So I got some supply chain examples here. I pulled some top CMOs. So Jubilant Hollister Steer, turns out, is the worst site in our database, okay? From regulatory information. Hopefully nobody's here from Jubilant and gonna throw stuff at me. It's just public information, it's our scoring model. Maybe their scoring model says that they're good. Our scoring model says that they're bad, okay? And so what you're doing is you're looking at different time slices. So if you look at them over 20-year history, they're bad. If you look at them at their 10-year history, they're bad. If you look at them the last 5 years, they're bad. Okay, so they've been consistently bad over different time frames, but you see here, this other one that I've redacted, they're doing pretty good recently, right? So the one right there, I don't have a pointer here, but get the point, okay? So that's one thing, and so what we've done is we've automatically processed all of this disparate information across millions of different data points and resolved it down to a simple score. And that's what we're talking about, human-machine interactions of like, oh, thank you for this recommendation of David Bowie, I will listen to it. Right? Thank you for this site score. Let me click in and get more information. I will look at it. And then you can go in deeper. So this is a specific site profile. This is my favorite site to pick on, Huspierre McPherson. They've been a dog for 20 years. They're still a dog. I probably will always be a dog. And so this is the site score over time. Oops, how do I go back? This is the site score over time. So somewhere around 2010, the regulators got wind of what was going on there, and they've just been getting worse and worse over time, and you see the various inspections that they've been hit with. Once again, all automatically processed. Then when you look at 483s, this is kind of the final thing that I'll show you. So this is critical issues found in 483s for a certain group of sites. These were the critical issues because, like I said, we extracted the observation, we processed it with a model, we put a scoring system in place. Hey, you have some really bad things going on, and with all of your 483s. So you could do this with audits, you could do this with deviations, you could do this with complaints, et cetera. So once again, simple visualizations leveraging AI-powered processing. And so I personally think that this is very achievable in the next 2 to 3 years. It's not gonna be ChatGPT, it's gonna be labeling stuff. Okay, thank you very much.
Multiple part question here. So how does AI account for variable change? So using the Pandora example, Ozzy is metal, but the definition of metal has evolved, especially in the last few years. Some would call it a subcategory of metal, like glam metal, or it even could be considered classic rock. So how does it account for variable change if the variables are changing over time?
It's very complicated, right? So always a human and machine must interact. And you basically can measure drift of the confidence interval of the model. So if you sort of improve your processing, if you improve, or if data's changing or things drift, you can actually measure the predictive value of the model. And you're looking at that and you're basically doing a control chart, around that. And once it passes out, a certain level, you know that something needs to be looked at, you need to redo your model, or you need to apply some new techniques. So this is not a set and forget technology any more than a human as a set and forget technology and just, oh, I read the GMP manual and that's all I ever need to know, right? So topics emerge, right, over time. So who knew anything about COVID-19 or coronaviruses or China viruses or Wuhan or any of that stuff, all within that sort of cluster of topics. And so it has to grow, it has to evolve. You have to have a system that can capture, drift, integrate new concepts, and then roll them out and apply it. It's just, it's a garden that constantly grows weeds. But so it's really no different from any other knowledge management venture with humans.
That ties into the second part of my question then is, because you have to have the human interaction with supervised learning, how does it account for bias as to who it's interacting with, who is considered the expert?
Yes. Yes. So our models are biased. They're biased to the way we think about the world. They're biased to how our customers think about things. So yes, they're absolutely biased. And if you like our bias, join up. So yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. You're not letting the machine make decisions. You're basically saying, good machine, bad machine. You're giving it the thumbs up, thumbs down. You're feeding it more examples to train it. You're deciding what's good enough, where to draw the line with the thresholds. So AI is littered with bias. But also, so if you're subject matter experts, you ask for their opinion. You're going to get a biased answer, right? In the case of the machine, it shows its work, and it shows its biases. It shows its confidence intervals, and it will show you when it's drifted, right? Your expert's not going to tell you when they were tired, they had too much to drink the night before, and half-assed the work. The machine will, right? So bias is everywhere. You're never going to get rid of bias. It's just, is it the bias you want? Okay?
So first, I do agree that Queen could be considered royalty, so I'm with you there. So.
All right, good. Good start.
Yeah, first example, you talked about hallucination, and that was, I think, more because of general. And then the second example, you were showing within the quality or the 483,
Yeah.
how it's providing, it's extracting from information. What would be the difference between, or could it hallucinate in that second?
Oh, the RAI? Yeah. Absolutely. It could totally hallucinate. So basically, so the models that we're building, we make it show the work. And then we're also bounding it within our own domain context. So it's a much smaller corpus of data, more focused corpus of data. So how it's able to do that is, so we've been the #1 Freedom of Information Act requester for the FDA for years. So we have a corpus of 20,000 warning letters, 27,000 483s, which is about 26,800 more than the FDA's released, right? So we've extracted all those individual observations, all those sentences, all the primary, secondary things. So we have all of this messy language. And so what we've done is we said, okay, well, here's a categorization model that we want to categorize 230 GMP categories. So things like quality unit, deviations in investigation, failure to root cause. Or quality unit, deviations in investigation, failure to investigate, right? So all these little differences, or production, sterile media fills, or production, sterile smoke studies. So you have like kind of this 3-level or 4-level tagging system, like kind of an auditor would do. So we've taken that framework and we put it there, and then we gave the machine a syllabus of all of these different examples. Here's 10 examples of this tag. Here's 10 examples of this tag, and it does its vectorization thing. Then it goes to the wild and it says, hey, here you go. Here's my answer. Here's my confidence interval. And that's pretty much how it works. Okay?
We use Redica for regulatory intelligence to get the data from guidance information from different regulators. And then SMEs review that and identify which document is impacted.
Yeah.
In your opinion, in the future, can we use AI for identifying that? Like, how can we monitor how these documents is impacting our quality system? So
that would be like regulation changes, rules changes, announcements, guidances, things like that. So all the examples I've given today are on enforcement documents and what's happening. So things like inspections and audits. So the simple answer is yes. So a couple days ago, I did an AI talk at the PDA, and it was more about regulatory intelligence. So that's a messier data set, right? The formats are messier. Basically, you're dealing with all the formats of the internet when you're dealing with regulatory monitoring, because there's presentations in there, there's all these different kind of things. Whereas like a warning letter is a little more structured, a 483 is a little more structured. So, but all of that said, it is going to be a combination of these models applied to specifically those documents, but it's going to be more, the human will be a little bit more involved in that. So you can use the AI to find stuff, but then that initial processing a lot of times has to be done by a human, because the machine's going to look at it and be like, I don't know what to do with this format. Okay? So it's a little bit like fish processing, like salmon, right? So they can't figure out a way to cut off the head and cut off the tail reliably by the machine. Just doesn't do a good job. So you get humans go, bump, bump. Humans are pretty good at that. And then it does the rest and puts it in cellophane, and there you go. Goes off to the store, but chopping off the head and chopping off the tail, for whatever reason, the machine can't figure out how to do that. So in a similar fashion for regulatory intelligence, what we're building is an offshore team, or we have an offshore team, but we're going to train the offshore team to extract, the fillet, and then pass that on to the AI, and the AI will do a lot better job, because it gets confused with all of the the different the sides and the bottoms and the footers. And so when you're doing a regulatory intelligence job, I mean, humans are pretty good at finding the stuff, just scanning and finding the stuff that matters. AI is pretty bad at it, actually. So we're going to use humans to do that and then pass it to the AI. So that's kind of future state. But does that answer your question? Okay.
With great knowledge comes great power. With great power comes great responsibility.
Yes.
Earlier, just outside, we were reflecting a bit on the first speaker this morning, talking about how did that kingpin, how did he learn all of that? The transferable skills to run a business so powerfully.
Yeah.
So powerfully. And so I'm thinking about all of the information you have from the agency and all this intelligence, and wondering about the unintended consequence of people gaming the system by getting great insights. The bad actors. We're all kind of on that team of wanting to protect patients, deal with gangsters. This is neutral. Good guys can have it, bad guys can too. Reflect on that a little bit.
So I'm not a not-for-profit. I am a for-profit entity. I'll start with that. People that don't care about quality, don't buy our software. People who are going to cheat, people who want to game the system, they just don't invest in quality, right? So what you're talking about is a sophisticated actor who's going to buy our stuff, who does, you're just not going to invest in quality, right? So, one of my mentors in the industry, Martin Van Trieste, who ran Civic RX, helped start RX360 with, Guy, you were there at the beginning, right? So basically what he told me, and I still believe it, I think it largely holds true, that you're going to spend about 10 to 20% of your operating budget on quality to do it right? That's what the big sponsors are spending, et cetera. Do you think the Chinese and Indians that are doing all of this stuff are spending 10 to 20% of their operating budget on quality, or do you think they're just trying to not get caught? That's kind of item number one. Number two is, we do have a responsibility. We are giving answers. We are making recommendations. And so it's always show your work and accept feedback with everything that you do. So I just mostly see this as, a fancy way of replacing spreadsheets and highlighters and making recommendations. I don't think that this will ever be an air quote validated system. I don't think that it's ever going to be, it's not replacing the QMS. It's not replacing your manufacturing batch release, release decisions. All of that still needs to be the human. We're not removing any agency. We're just doing some work to make things easier and give you some notifications. So that's how I approach it. But also, but once again, I'll go back to this. People that don't care about quality don't buy Redica Systems, right? That's, very few, I think we have one customer in China, if that tells you anything. So we're mostly dealing with the big sponsors that are just trying to do a better job and do it more efficiently for patients. So that's who we're serving. Keith?
Mike, so thank you for the education. I learned quite a bit. But you had a slide that set out on the left what GPT was good at. and on the right, what it was not good at.
Yes.
And I think because of what it's good at will induce us to believe that what it's bad at is not important, because it writes so well
Yeah.
that it seduces us, that it's
Yeah, it's
likely
scary.
to be. Yeah. So what this means is, at the end of the day, what we're going to be paid for is critical judgment,
Yes.
as usual.
Yes.
It's been like this for a couple of millennia. So all this stuff just will probably make our work more interesting. 30 or 40 years ago, when we did research, we'd go to the chemical abstracts, we'd spend the whole morning looking for the articles we wanted. We'd send a telegram to the British Library. 3 weeks later, the articles would come. So we spent 3 weeks looking for the data.
Yes.
And then in the morning, we'd conclude that half the articles were irrelevant, but the other ones were good.
That's right.
Now we look for stuff and it's instantaneous and we get the Google out,
Yeah.
With this will do it faster, but we still need to be critical about what it's spewing out.
I completely agree.
So this is really what the universities have to do to us. Get our brains to be more critical.
I think in some ways, one of my fears is that, like for my children, right, that AI will kind of do things for you and it kind of dumbs down the human race. That is one of my fears. So one of the things that we haven't yet cracked, and every AI use case is different for this, is what does that user experience needs to look like, right? So in the case of us, it's showing your work, showing why you did the work that it did, and basically collating everything for you. So just like, your research, you look through, you highlight the things you care about, you get it back, you discard. You have to basically present the results in a way that explain why you got the results. And then as you interact with the data, it has to also store that as well. So I think that's a bigger part of the challenge, the ambiguity for me, of like getting that right. But yeah, I definitely agree with you that it is just the next step of knowledge work that we've been doing forever, and it's a little bit like a bicycle, right? So instead of walking, you kind of ride a bike, and you're a little bit more efficient. That's kind of how I view it. Whereas I think that a lot of these other AI use cases are maybe more like the unsupervised learning things. The machine can actually see things that you can't see, right? With spinning equipment and things like that, just because there's just too many data points. Whereas I think that this is just more about structuring kind of the unstructured. So does that address?
Yeah, because if you take this forward, this most likely our productivity is incredibly accelerated because we spend less time doing the chores rather than. So this probably also explains why we all get a sense that the expansion of knowledge is so much accelerated.
Well, I certainly hope so. That's my belief. That's my hope that, like that thing happens with the DuPont warning letter with microcrystalline cellulose. You see it, it makes a recommendation that there's a major event that happened. Because it's not like everybody in the industry knew that it happened right away when it did happen. And then it took people weeks and months to figure out the impact. And so if we can reduce that down to instantaneous, right? And then it collates all the answers, how much better can we be about making decisions for patient safety? And so same thing could be applied to adverse events and complaints and deviations and investigations and things like that. There's critical insights that's lurking in the unstructured mess of our data. And if we can build the right models, we can get the right alerts and hopefully make better decisions.
So Mike, there is interpretation when you are building the information.
Yes.
So what's coming out also needs to be interpreted. And how is
Like the
would
new
that-
information?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, so basically the front end of all of this process are experts, subject matter experts. So some of them are kind of our customers interacting with us, helping us build better models. So, and then our own subject matter experts that we've hired, because like I didn't notice nitrosamines. Like the first thing that happened, I think it was at Novartis that basically told the European Medicines Agency, and then the European Medicines Agency did something. Then like there were certain experts that were like, oh my gosh, that stuff's in everything, right? Like there were some people at the very beginning that were pointing, but that trickled out slowly. And so the challenge with this is how do the machines help serve up the incidents ahead of time? Because these models work when you have already kind of identified the issue. So for example, right, statistical models, lots of unstructured information. Is your house worth $2 million? Is there a good model for that? There's a great model for that. If you live in California, yes. You know, if you live in the middle of nowhere, maybe not, all right? Except if it's in California, right? So you know the zip code, you know the square feet, you know, it's not plus or minus 5%, you can predict that, right? So you can structure all this unstructured information, put it through that model, and make a very, very nice prediction. So where a little bit of this unsupervised learning can do, it can kind of suggest things that it might see. It could see perturbations in the ether and then serve it up to a human to say, is this important? Is this not important? It's really good at seeing perturbations. It's really bad at knowing what's important. So you're still gonna need that human to say, yes, this is important. So it's gonna interact. And then, okay, how broad is this topic? I mean, just go back to COVID. What are they calling it? COVID-19, and then we all found out what a coronavirus was, and then we all found out about Wuhan, and then we all start, you know, you call it China virus or not call it China virus. You call it China virus, it tells you something, right? And so you have all this knowledge graph just was created overnight, and we all have this new language. So, you know, can the machine do all of that automatically? No, right? An expert has to be there. That's why it's supervised.
So do you plan to have any disclaimer or any type of...
Yeah, that's everything. So just like I said, you show your work. Yeah, everything. Everything is you know, this is our label. This is our confidence interval. Thumbs up, thumbs down, right? So that goes back to the whole thing. And it's like, we're not the qualified person, right? We're just helping do the work. And if you don't trust the answer, then do the work. I mean, I don't mean to be like flippant with it, but yeah, like you do as good as you can, you show your work, and you keep getting better over time. That's really all that can be done.
No, I like the use of augmented.
Yeah.
It really helps.
Yeah, there's really nothing artificial about it. It's statistics, right? Yes.
Hey, so I just wanted to emphasize on some of the strengths as well. You know, when you're trying to identify a new supplier, you're trying to select new vendors, you know, you already have some, you know, data that's available, you know, that you can go back and look at. And there's ways to, you know, operate it. And at least it's a tool, right? Google didn't happen overnight. My question to you is, what is your strategy to increase your target audience by potentially including third-party vendor audits and things like that into your database?
Yeah, I mean, talk to Jim about that. No, so there's different data sets that are fully public, which is what we operate in right now. So we are working with customers on, so for example, say some big global pharma company has these 500 CMOs. Well, they have to tell us who those CMOs are. We have to link it to a Redica ID, then we can run the report. So we do have some private information, but then the next phase of our business is using our models on top of that internal audit data. But then you have people like, you know, the Lockmans of the world, the RX360s of the world, the SQA services of the world, and how can we potentially do data partnerships with those? But you have all this data rights and data ownership and things. So those are tougher problems, right? The privacy problems, things like that. So that's why we've mostly just stayed in public data, like do amazing things with public data and then earn the right to get into private data sets is how we're approaching it. But I mean, privacy and data, privacy and these models, that problem's been solved a long time ago. right? Fraud risk detection in banking, all those software architectures, all those securities, done. Many, many, many years ago, you just leverage that. And don't try and reinvent something new. Just use those kind of like secure architectures, and all of this stuff can apply to that as well. Okay. Anything else?
So, can I?
Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. I think it made it very accessible to everyone here. That's why there are so many questions, probably. I was about to ask something related to maybe industry-generated information, so from audits from the different companies or from different consortium like RX. But you mentioned that you started with the FDA because of the structure is very consistent. It has been for so
FDA is great, by the way. You'll never hear me talk bad about the FDA.
Totally.
FDA is great. They produce more information than all other agencies combined.
And
FDA
make it
is great.
available, which is also great that they actually make it available and in a very structured form that then a machine can learn how to read.
Yes.
How about other agencies out there that are also reputable, but maybe not sharing so much or in a so structured way? And second question, we're focusing here on what's published by FDA, which is usually the bad stuff. You always get 483, you get warning letters. That's where the juicy information is, but you're not rating good.
Yes, we are. So I didn't show you the good parts.
Yeah, I would like to see what is there for the good part.
Well, you just got to scroll down to the list. At the bottom of the list is where all the good suppliers are.
No, the good suppliers are, but understood as those that don't have like big issues.
Yes.
But is there a way of measuring like, because FDA doesn't go around saying pat on their shoulder, right? They go and tell you what you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
But is there a way to identify what is being done good, not as the absence or bad?
Yeah. So one of my favorite sayings is absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So you're kind of talking about that problem. Like we have the data that we have. And so our expert models, so at this point, we're talking about like an expert model of like, what does no data tell us? Well, let's say you have 1,000 suppliers and 400 of them have never been inspected by an agency, as we can see across all the work we do in the Redica database. Well, that tells you something right there. And if your auditors are arguing, and if they're making a critical material, let's say they're doing a key starting material for you, or they're doing some sort of custom filter or something like that, and they have no regulatory history, you're probably going to want to make some data for them. So you're going to not want to skip that audit on that one, right? Whereas maybe somebody who's been inspected 100 times by 10 different agencies and they got a long history and they're pretty good, well, you can make decisions on that. So part of these models are just pointing out where you don't have enough data to make a decision, right? So I hope that answers your question. It's not inventing things. It's just, and then the machine wouldn't know that that's important, right? But you can program that in, just like Zillow, right? Is it important that the agencies haven't been there in 10 years? Is it important that the agencies inspected it and then came back 5 months later with 5 more inspectors? Yes, right? So you just kind of program the knowledge in there, and then you kind of grow from there as you see it. Okay.